Hi, it's Nathan, and today I found some of the most downright ridiculous ways people have exited this world. From 4 first-time robbers whose getaway car exploded in the middle of downtown traffic to a repairman launching himself across an abandoned quarry before one mistake changed everything in the craziest way possible. It was October 14, 2017, in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, during a humid fall evening where the air still carried leftover summer heat. Food trucks lined the streets around the jewelry district. Live music echoed between brick storefronts, and thousands of people moved through the festival crowds packed across the sidewalks. The jewelry store sat near a busy intersection surrounded by bars and restaurants. By closing time, traffic had already slowed for several blocks. Noel Reed, 28, had spent years drifting between repair work and short-term jobs. After losing his apartment and falling behind on child support payments, investigators said he became fixated on pulling off one major robbery to fix everything at once. I can see how desperate Noel is. He really believed that chasing easy money would wipe away all his problems. The others around him were no better prepared. Devin Holt, 24, drifted between motels and couches without steady work. Luis Garza, 31, previously worked security jobs before assault charges damaged his employment chances. Tyler Wynn, 22, handled the driving after stealing a dark blue sedan 2 days earlier. None of them had military experience. None of them understood explosives. Earlier that afternoon, Luis reportedly drank beer inside a motel room while showing off a military-style fragmentation grenade obtained through a criminal contact. Witnesses later described him partially pulling the pin ring loose as a joke before pushing it back into place. The robbery plan depended entirely on speed: rush the store, smash display cases, grab jewelry, and escape before police responded. At approximately 7:52 p.m., Noel and Devin entered the jewelry store wearing hooded sweatshirts and cheap Halloween masks. Tyler waited behind the wheel roughly 40 feet away with the engine running, while Luis stood near the entrance holding the grenade. The robbery started falling apart almost immediately. Noel smashed the first display case with a short sledgehammer, sending broken tempered glass across the showroom floor and cutting his forearm deeply enough to leave blood across the counter. The store owner, a 63-year-old man legally carrying a handgun beneath the register, drew his weapon after Devin pointed a revolver toward a customer. Gunfire erupted inside the store within seconds. One bullet struck Noel in the shoulder and knocked him into another display case. Devin fired wildly toward the back wall while customers crawled toward the exit. Luis panicked. Witnesses later stated Luis pulled the grenade safety pin completely free, but then appeared unsure whether to throw it inside the store or outside toward approaching sirens. Instead, he backed out of the entrance, still clutching something tightly in his right hand, while the others fled toward the waiting sedan. Noel stumbled toward the car, clutching jewelry trays while bleeding heavily from the shoulder. Tyler accelerated away hard enough to clip a parked scooter as Devin shouted for everyone to keep their heads down. Surveillance footage later showed the sedan speeding through downtown traffic at nearly 70 miles per hour, while panic completely replaced whatever plan they originally had. Witness footage captured people inside the car yelling over each other as Tyler fought to control the vehicle through traffic. Then Luis shouted that he still had the grenade in his hand. Investigators later determined he had never released the safety lever after pulling the pin. Roughly 22 seconds after the sedan sped away, the grenade detonated inside the passenger compartment. The explosion blew out every window and ripped through the cabin with metal fragments and pressure. Tyler lost control immediately as the sedan jumped a curb and crashed into a utility pole. Luis absorbed most of the blast directly against his chest and abdomen, killing him instantly. Noel suffered catastrophic abdominal injuries from grenade fragments tearing through the rear seat, while Devin's lower jaw and throat were shredded by fragmentation traveling from the back seat forward. Smoke poured from the destroyed sedan while the horn blared continuously into the intersection. Emergency crews later found all 4 men dead at the scene or fatally injured inside the wreckage. If only they had played fair, looked for something legal, something real, maybe their lives could have turned out so much better. Instead, chasing shortcuts just dragged them deeper into trouble. Investigators recovered the grenade spoon, pin ring, 2 revolvers, and smashed jewelry trays from the wreckage. Authorities later confirmed the explosion inside the car, not the collision. caused the fatal injuries. The store owner survived with a gunshot wound through his left hand after firing multiple rounds during the robbery. Local investigators ultimately described the robbery as disorganized and reckless, concluding that the deadliest part of the incident was caused entirely by the suspects themselves during the escape. For our next story, nobody expected a harmless prank at a construction site to end with firefighters cutting apart an industrial machine. It was October 7, 2017, at a suburban housing development outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. The ground across the unfinished neighborhood was still soft from several days of rain, and muddy tire ruts cut through the dirt roads between partially framed homes. Most crews spent the morning waiting because earlier storms had delayed deliveries and slowed construction across the site. That was where 26-year-old Abby Miller spent most of her week doing temporary labor work. Abby had built a reputation for pulling harmless but annoying pranks whenever work slowed down, hiding inside portable toilets, jumping out of dumpsters, climbing into empty tool trailers to scare co-workers recording on their phones. I think you will agree with me that we've all met someone like this, the kind of person who keeps pushing the joke a little too far. At first, it feels funny, but they don't realize when the line's been crossed. But Abby's problem wasn't really attention online. Co-workers said she hated how tense construction sites became whenever work slowed down. She treated delays like chances to wake people up and make them laugh. Over time, being the funny one became part of her identity, and every prank had to top the last one. A towable cement mixer sat near the center of the site beside stacks of rebar and wooden forms prepared for a sidewalk pour. The drum had already been partially loaded with water and bags of dry cement earlier in the day. Workers said Abby repeatedly joked that the mixer looked like a carnival ride while climbing onto nearby machinery during lunch break. Phone videos later showed her pretending to operate equipment while co-workers laughed nearby. Investigators also noted warning labels posted near the rear opening advising workers to stay clear while the machine was active. As the afternoon continued, several workers stayed near the mixer waiting for another delivery truck. Around that period, Abby climbed into the rear opening of the mixer drum, planning to hide inside and scare the next person who approached. Security footage later showed Abby crouching deeper into the steel drum moments before the operator returned. An operator returned from a supply run without knowing anyone had entered the mixer. He walked toward the controls, started the gas-powered motor, and engaged the rotating drum. The sound of the machine immediately drowned out nearby conversation. Witnesses later said the steel drum rattled loudly once it began turning because wet concrete slurry already coated the interior paddles. Abby started screaming almost immediately, but the engine noise and grinding concrete mixture drowned out most of her voice once the machine fully engaged. Inside the drum, the rotating steel paddles violently threw Abby against the interior walls within seconds. Investigators determined she suffered catastrophic blunt force and crushing injuries almost immediately as her body became trapped between the paddles and the heavy concrete mixture, folding over itself inside the rotating drum. My heart honestly breaks for Abby. Somewhere along the line, making people laugh became more important to her than recognizing when something had crossed from harmless into dangerous. One laborer finally recognized the frantic pounding against the drum over the engine noise. The operator immediately shut the mixer down, but by then, Abby's body had already become wedged beneath the steel paddles under hundreds of pounds of wet concrete. Workers attempted to reverse the drum manually, while others used buckets and shovels trying to remove wet cement around her body. Firefighters eventually dismantled sections of the mixer using cutting torches and saws during the recovery operation. Responders later confirmed Abby died from catastrophic crush and blunt force injuries caused by the rotating mixer drum and internal paddles. The construction site shut down for the rest of the week while investigators inspected the mixer and collected witness statements. Investigators concluded the operator had no indication someone was hiding inside the drum before startup. And for me, this story is another reminder that heavy equipment does not care whether somebody is joking or not. The next case starts with a crowd laughing around a fire right before one bad step turned everyone from cheering into panicking within seconds. It was August 22, 2015, at an abandoned gravel pit outside Des Moines, Iowa. The night air smelled like smoke, gasoline, and burned plastic drifting across the open pit, while phone flashlights bounced across gravel and scattered beer cans. The ground near the bonfire had become uneven from hours of people running, drinking, and throwing scrap wood into the flames. Sparks floated upward into the darkness beyond the pit walls. Kim Sterling, 22, spent most of her weekends with friends after getting off work. People described Kim as outgoing, impulsive, and competitive whenever crowds started daring each other to do reckless things. According to several witnesses, Kim hated looking scared in front of people. I can see a lot of people like that, the kind who would rather push themselves too far than admit they're uncomfortable or afraid. And if you ask me, I think that mindset is wrong because I believe your weakness can also be your greatest strength. Roughly 15 people gathered at the gravel pit that night after a birthday party earlier in town. Witnesses later told deputies the bonfire kept growing for hours as people threw in wooden pallets, scrap lumber, old tires, and plastic debris found around the property. Several people spent part of the night filming dirt bike jumps near smaller fires, while others ran and leaped over narrow sections of the flames for videos. Alcohol reportedly flowed heavily throughout the evening, and investigators later determined gasoline had repeatedly been poured onto the bonfire to create larger flames for recordings. Kim became one of the center points of the crowd as the night continued. Witnesses later stated she accepted multiple smaller dares earlier in the evening, including sprinting close to the fire and jumping over burning debris while people filmed with their phones. At some point, someone proposed a full-speed jump across the widest part of the fire pit. Several witnesses later confirmed Kim immediately volunteered after people around the fire started encouraging her while aiming phone cameras toward her. Investigators later recovered cell phone videos showing Kim pacing roughly 40 feet back from the flames, while people nearby cleared space around the gravel path leading toward the fire. One attendee poured another stream of gasoline directly onto the pallets moments before Kim lined up for the jump. The flames surged roughly 8 to 10 feet high, while burning fuel splashed outward across loose gravel surrounding the pit. Broken bottles and spilled gasoline covered the ground near the jump area. Witnesses said Kim sprinted toward the flames at full speed, wearing loose jeans and lightweight running shoes, while several friends filmed nearby. As she planted her left foot near the edge of the fire, her shoes slipped sideways on gasoline-soaked gravel. The slip shortened her jump immediately. Instead of clearing the fire, both lower legs dropped directly into the burning pallet pile before the rest of her body pitched forward chest first into the flames. Investigators later determined burning gasoline spread rapidly across her shirt, arms, and hair within seconds after the fall. The fire spread too fast. Kim attempted to crawl across burning boards and melted plastic debris while flames continued feeding off gasoline soaked into her clothing. One friend grabbed her arm, trying to pull her free but lost grip because fuel and burned fabric made her clothes slippery. Other attendees threw beer cans and small water bottles toward her, though investigators later stated the amounts were nowhere near enough to suppress a gasoline-fed fire. By the time someone reached a fire extinguisher from a nearby truck, Kim had already suffered extensive burns across most of her body. I keep wondering what really made Kim step up to volunteer. Was it the attention she hoped to get from the crowd, or was it her own way of proving to herself that she could handle it? Kim later died at a nearby hospital from severe thermal injuries and airway damage caused by inhaling superheated smoke and flames. Fire investigators later concluded gasoline poured onto the pallets moments before the jump caused burning fuel to spread rapidly across Kim's clothing after she fell. Authorities issued several minor citations related to trespassing and underage drinking, though no broader criminal charges followed. We've got more unbelievably stupid deaths coming up, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how one reckless decision can turn a normal day into a fatal mistake. It was July 18, 2016, outside a rural reservoir near Chattanooga, Tennessee. The air still felt heavy from the afternoon rain, and the shoreline looked darker than usual under the fading sunset. The lake itself looked calm, except for insects skimming across the surface and the occasional ripple near the reeds. That was where Jack Vance arrived with two longtime friends, Diego 30 and Vincent 33. They bought coolers in the truck bed, fishing rods tied together with zip ties, and a cheap action camera strapped across his chest. Jack Vance was 31 and bounced between maintenance jobs at storage facilities and rental properties around town. People who knew him described him as the kind of guy who always had a story or a joke ready, but being around him too long could get draining because every situation eventually turned into some kind of dare or performance. According to his friends, Jack had recently become obsessed with recording dangerous outdoor clips for social media. Nothing major had taken off yet, but he kept escalating the risks. From my observation, it feels like Jack got hooked on the attention he can get from the people around him. Every stunt had to be crazier because normal stuff stopped getting reactions. The views and laughs were temporary, but the risks were always real. Earlier that week, Vince joked about illegal blast fishing after seeing videos online where explosions stunned fish near the surface. Somehow, the joke kept going until Jack obtained old explosive cartridges through a former quarry laborer he knew from temporary construction jobs. Investigators later confirmed the group brought several cartridges to the reservoir hidden beneath camping gear inside Jack's truck. Witnesses near the shoreline reported hearing Jack bragging loudly about throwing one halfway across the lake. Another fisherman later told deputies the group sounded more focused on filming than fishing. As sunset got lower, Diego used wire cutters to shorten the fuse on a cartridge while another stood back recording with a phone. Investigators believed the idea was to make the throw happen faster on camera. Jack climbed onto a narrow embankment about 4 feet above the waterline. The rocks beneath him were wet from earlier rainfall, coated with algae and soft mud near the edges. Evidence photos later showed disturbed moss where his boots slipped. The fuse ignited almost immediately. Witnesses said sparks reached his wrist faster than expected, and instead of throwing right away, Jack hesitated. Investigators believed he was trying to time the throw for the recording. That hesitation became the entire story. As Jack stepped forward, his right boot slid sideways across the moss-covered rock. His body twisted awkwardly, interrupting the throwing motion halfway through. The explosive never fully left his hand. The blast detonated less than 2 feet from his upper body. Investigators determined the explosion destroyed most of his right hand and forearm instantly, while rock fragments and debris struck his neck, jaw, and chest. Nearby fishermen later described hearing a deep, popping blast echo across the reservoir, like a mechanical failure from a boat engine. Vincent dropped the recording phone while running toward him. Blood spread across the rocks and into the shallow edge of the reservoir, while nearby campers started yelling farther down the shoreline. I really don't understand why Jack had to push things that far, just to prove something to other people. He knew holding an explosive in his hand was really dangerous, but he still went through with it anyway. Emergency responders reached the reservoir roughly 22 minutes later because of poor access roads around the shoreline. Paramedics confirmed Jack died before they arrived from catastrophic blast injuries and rapid blood loss. Deputies shut the area down overnight while bomb technicians searched for additional explosives. The damaged cell phone containing the explosion footage was voluntarily handed over during the investigation. Wildlife officers later confirmed the group had been illegally attempting blast fishing, though authorities did not pursue broader charges after Jack's death. The next case begins with a group of friends trying to create a homemade stunt video near an abandoned quarry. It was June 27, 2015, at an abandoned quarry lake outside Birmingham. The summer heat still lingered over the limestone pit even late in the day, and the air around the quarry smelled like wet stone, motor oil, lake water, and dirt kicked up by truck tires along the access road. Engine noise and shouting echoed across the open pit as small groups of trespassers wandered through the area watching homemade stunts near the shoreline. That was where 27-year-old Leo Dalton arrived, with 4 friends carrying climbing harnesses, industrial bungee cords, tow straps, and camera equipment packed into the back of an older sedan. Leo worked general repair jobs at a local auto body shop and spent most weekends filming homemade stunt videos around abandoned sites and rural lakes. Friends later described him as fearless in the worst possible way. If something looked dangerous, Leo usually saw it as a challenge first and a bad idea second. According to investigators, Leo had recently become fixated on proving he could build real stunt setups without professional equipment. People close to him later said he hated being treated like some broke mechanic pretending to be an adrenaline junkie online. He constantly talked about showing that he could outdo expensive professional setups using scrapyard parts, homemade engineering, and pure nerve. The videos weren't really about fame to him anymore. They became about proving he was smarter and tougher than the people warning him to stop. I think that mindset is honestly worse than chasing attention. At least clout chasing admits it's reckless. But when someone starts believing they're too skilled to fail, that's when they stop seeing obvious danger as danger at all. The idea for the stunt reportedly came from online videos the group watched earlier that week. Investigators later determined the plan involved creating a homemade human slingshot by attaching heavy-duty industrial cords between Leo's climbing harness and the rear hitch of a car parked beside the quarry. The goal was simple in theory. The driver would accelerate across the dirt clearing, stretch the cords tight, and launch Leo outward toward the lake. Witnesses later stated the group spent nearly an hour adjusting straps, checking harness clips, and filming setup footage while revving the car engine for the camera. Several nearby trespassers eventually gathered near the quarry edge after hearing shouting echo through the site. Investigators later noted the industrial cords used in the setup had been salvaged from a scrapyard and already showed visible weather cracking near the metal hook attachments. Despite that, the group continued preparing the stunt. Earlier in the afternoon, Leo completed several smaller launches at lower speeds without serious problems. According to witnesses, those successful attempts gave the group more confidence before deciding to attempt what they described as a full power launch toward the center of the lake. That's the trap with homemade stunts. The first few attempts don't prove the setup is safe. They just convince people the laws of physics are somehow negotiable. As the cameras continued recording, Leo clipped into the harness and positioned himself roughly 15 feet from the quarry edge while the industrial cord stretched behind him toward the car. The driver accelerated hard across the dirt clearing. Witnesses later described the cords snapping tight almost instantly before Leo was violently jerked forward several feet above the uneven quarry edge. At first, the launch appeared successful, but several witnesses later stated Leo seemed to move faster and farther than expected, overshooting the intended water entry point near the limestone wall. Then, one of the weathered industrial cords snapped near the metal hook attachment point. Investigators later determined the uneven tension immediately twisted Leo sideways in midair and redirected his body away from the deeper section of water. Instead of entering the quarry lake cleanly, Leo rotated shoulder first toward the limestone wall near the edge. His left shoulder struck a rock ledge first, before the side of his head slammed into exposed stone near the waterline. The impact spun his body downward across jagged rocks before he slid partially into shallow water along the quarry edge. Witnesses nearby immediately jumped down toward the narrow ledge and dragged him away from the water, while blood spread across the rocks and shoreline beneath him. Emergency responders later confirmed the collision caused massive skull fractures, neck trauma, and severe chest injuries. Paramedics pronounced Leo dead at the scene after determining the injuries were unsurvivable. Authorities officially classified the death as an accidental stunt fatality involving improvised equipment failure. Local responders later described the abandoned quarry as a frequent trespassing location used for dangerous recreational stunts. Warning signs remained posted along the quarry access road after investigators cleared the scene.